updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So yesterday, the Fed held interest rates constant. Not sure that inflation beast has been tamed yet. And of course, this presupposes that the Fed is in the business of taming inflation, which I know our next guest will challenge. But you've got to continue challenging the received wisdom if you want people to question it. John Tamny is the editor of RealClearMarket's, RealClearMarket's.com, and the author of The Money Confusion, How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I know you were waiting with bated breath for the Fed's pronouncement yesterday. I know you're a big Fed watcher.
Yeah, imagine we talk about prices all the time as the sum of infinite global cooperation. But let's just have the Fed fiddle with some price control that it alleges it has control over to bring prices down. It's the most ridiculous thing. Future economic archaeologists will look back and say, how could the world have been so collectively stupid as to believe that a bunch of economists could somehow bring down prices? It's just absurd, and it staggers me that it keeps making front page news.
No, it's not. It's not economists. It's politicians that do it. So Trump was responsible for higher egg prices in the first 4 weeks of his administration, and now he's responsible for egg prices being cut by about 2/3.
Yeah, they always do it. Nothing about people working together. Nothing about advances in production techniques, just whatever politicians do.
From a realpolitik perspective, let's exit the world of philosophy here for a moment. A realpolitik world perspective, what's your view of the argument that you can use America's leverage as the world's preeminent economic power and tariffs, the threat of tariffs, the reality of tariffs, as a way to browbeat other countries to reducing their trade barriers, and this reciprocity that Trump is promoting as the basis of policymaking. Ultimately, because of our position, we can get trade barriers. We're never going to have free trade, but we can get trade barriers reduced on both sides with our trading partners. And that's a perhaps difficult but necessary means to ends which even free market types like you should like.
Well, I don't totally reject it while I think it's a bad strategy. Let's never forget that any business anywhere in the world has a U.S. strategy. That's its dream, to sell into the biggest market in the world. And so if you look at it through that, okay, yeah, if you guys don't lower your tariffs, we're going to put them up. And that would obviously scare a lot of people and a lot of businesses around the world. They want to be in the United States because we're the most productive people. You want to sell to those people. In my perfect world, what Trump would do is say, we're going to zero. If you don't follow us, you'll fall even further behind the United States in terms of economic promise. People working together, the liberal country, the country with the most open markets, is always the victor, because people do best when the world is serving them, simply because when the world's serving you, you can do the kind of work that you like the most. So I don't love Trump's strategy, but he got elected president twice. I never have been, and I never will be, so maybe he knows something I don't.
Well, I mean, don't give up the dream. I mean, one never knows. J.D. Vance yesterday, or the other day, spoke at this American Innovation Summit, and he talked about the two conceits of globalization. And I wanted to get your reaction to, both of them. The second one is sort of straightforward. Cheap labor. This is what the Chamber of Commerce has become addicted to, and reducing the influx of cheap labor will spur innovation. But hold on that one first. First, I want to get the first conceit, which is the separating of design and production.
Because there were two conceits that our leadership class had when it came to globalization. The first is assuming that we can separate the making of things from the design of things. The idea of globalization was that rich countries would move further up the value chain while the poor countries made the simpler things. You would open an iPhone box and it would say designed in Cupertino, California. Now the implication, of course, is that it would be manufactured in Shenzhen or somewhere else. And yeah, some people might lose their jobs in manufacturing, but they could learn to design, or to use a very popular phrase, learn to code. But I think we got it wrong. It turns out that the geographies that do the manufacturing get awfully good at the designing of things. There are network effects, as you all well understand. The firms that design products work with firms that manufacture. They share intellectual property, they share best practices, and they even sometimes share critical employees. Now, we assume that other nations would always trail us in the value chain, but it turns out that as they got better at the low end of the value chain, they also started catching up on the higher end. We were squeezed from both ends.
Is that what happened?
Sure, and what a beautiful thing. Let's never forget that if other countries, people in other countries can do things really well, that doesn't put us out of work. It just frees us up to do even more innovative things. You can only be first once. And so Apple was first with the smartphone, and it transformed. Is it any surprise that entities in other parts of the world are trying to do the same thing? But, they're late. Apple, if it were still focused on the iPhone, would see its stock in rapid decline. Apple's focusing on what's next as the rest of the world catches up on smartphones. So I think what he says is true. I just think he misreads it and mischaracterizes it to his audience.
In terms of saying that the result is that we should be pursuing industrial policy that compels onshoring, or at least reshoring away from mainland China to less nefarious characters than the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, that part is nonsense, and how we know that if Apple had tried to both design and manufacture the iPhone in the United States, it likely wouldn't exist, and it wouldn't exist for two reasons. A, we don't have that manufacturing base in the United States, and one major reason we don't is the American people don't like manufacturing jobs. J.D. Vance leaves out the basic truth that Americans have been rushing from factory jobs and mill jobs for decades, and that's why those towns died. They didn't die because the mills closed. They died because the people left. And so we wouldn't have been able to make the iPhone in the first place. And even if we'd been able to, it would have been so expensive that it wouldn't have become a global device. And so Apple became the most valuable company in the world precisely because it used global cooperation to create it. And the consequence is that the jobs multiplier in Silicon Valley is enormous. Vance looks at the tech workers, but look at the baristas, look at the personal trainers, look at the lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, all the people who have really good jobs because Apple is thriving there. And so he totally mischaracterizes the genius of us working with people around the world.
But now, are you completely indifferent to America having a manufacturing base or not, based on the preferences of the American people, for example? Because one would argue, I think, and there's a lot of truth to this, that sort of manufacturing is a force multiplier when it comes to wealth creation in a way that a lot of service sector industries are not.
I'm completely indifferent to it. What I want is businesses to do what they do best. We don't do manufacturing well. That's a compliment to the United States. That's not a negative thing. I can't stress enough again that if you look at the manufacturing sectors of the United States, they call them Rust Belt for a reason. The people did not want those jobs. Bruce Springsteen wrote lots of songs about the genius of factories, but by his own admission, he'd never even entered in one. These are things that people romanticize that have nothing to do with reality. Those who've actually worked in factories, they would always tell their kids, We're working in these factories so that you don't have to. Go somewhere else. Follow your dreams. Don't do this. And so, you don't need a manufacturing sector any more than you need a banana sector. What you need is you need productivity, and productivity is born with dividing up the work with an increasing number of hands and machines around the world. That's why we're the richest country on earth. That we don't discriminate in terms of where our production comes from.
So what would you say to Mike Rowe and his foundation that provides scholarships to young people who don't want to go to college? They want to become, tradesmen, electricians, operating engineers, carpenters, what have you, as well as a lot of push on curriculum at the secondary level and then the apprentice level as a lead-in, for, again, people to not go to college but to get into the trades and build stuff.
I'd say thumbs up. College is vastly overrated. It's never made any sense in a trade sense. There's nothing college can teach you that you can't already learn by being on the job. College was always just a signaling device for people to say we're smart, we're at a higher class than you, whatever it is. But it was never about preparing you for the work future. That's just absurd, because by definition, jobs in a rich country like the U.S. change all the time. The U.S. universities were built by people who largely did not go to college themselves, but just knew how to prosper. And so I've got nothing against that. And certainly, in a world that is increasingly specialized, I think people who are skillful in the way of making things, making furniture, making things in very specialized ways, they've got a huge future in a country like the United States.
But bespoke things, whereas technology will automate so many of the things that are commoditized, is your point?
Oh, that's going to be great. What could be better than to have, if you are an individual who's got really good skills at creating things, what could be better than to have machines doing all the things that you don't have time to do or that limit your genius so that you can focus on what you do best? I mean, what did they say about coal? They said about coal that its rollout was the equivalent of giving every individual American worker something like 20 full-time assistants. And so any machine doesn't put us out of work. It just allows us to specialize. It's the Adam Smith pin factory all over again. One man working alone can maybe produce one pin per day, but one man working with several other people can produce tens of thousands. Machines don't hurt us. They enable us to be much more productive. I mean, if we wanted everyone to have jobs, it'd be easy. We would just abolish the wheel and the internet and the computer. Everyone would be working, but they would be miserable simply because they would have to do things that they didn't have to do before. Machines don't hurt us. They just allow us to specialize in the way that people working alongside us allow us to specialize.
The cheap labor argument that J.D. Vance suggested was the second conceit of globalization, the influx of cheap labor, reducing, the argument goes, reducing the wages that Americans earn, replacing Americans in the workforce. And they touted the February jobs report as a significant increase in job creation that was filled by Americans as opposed to non-American citizens. What do you think about that argument, and how far are you willing to go when it comes to the sort of global free movement of labor?
Oh, come on. J.D. Vance is talking nonsense. And how we know this is, where does the vast majority of investment in the United States go? It goes to San Francisco, New York, Boston, Dallas. So what does that tell you? It tells you that businesses, investors want expensive labor. The vast majority of investment goes to where labor is most expensive because you get the most productivity out of it. There's also this notion that if we just keep people out of the United States, we keep the, quote, cheap labor out of the United States, that we shield Americans from it. Nonsense. The only closed economy is the world economy. I mean, what are we talking about here? We keep talking about how American businesses rely on people and factories from around the world. And so if you want to keep wages coming up in the United States, the logical thing to do is to allow those individuals to come into the United States, because the minute they get here, their worth in the labor market skyrockets. It's when they're competing with us from outside the United States, when they lack the investment, when they lack the equipment to make them productive, that they're actually, quote, competitive as cheap labor, if that's what you believe. Get them into the United States and their wages will go up. That's why they're coming here, because they want to realize abilities they can't realize in other countries where their labor is viewed as cheap.
Right. So, I mean, do you, if that's your perspective, then with respect to the various visa programs that provide for people to come into this country and work or work temporarily, is that the way we should do it, or we should have just some sort of vetting process to make sure that people are going to work, you're not going to receive any welfare benefits, and come whoever may?
Well, it's a great question, and I'll begin it with what's the biggest driver of economic growth in Mexico right now? Is it tourism? Is it oil? It's actually remittances from the United States, $63 billion last year. And so what does that tell you? It tells you, first of all, they're not coming here to get on the dole. They're coming here because they can get better jobs. And so in my perfect world, we would tell people, hey, work is legal here. We just ask you to announce ourselves so that if you announce yourselves, we can use a much smaller force to go after people who don't announce themselves. You're free to come back and forth. And what you'd find, what is the other thing? What do American dollars remitted back to Mexico build in massive amounts? Houses for Mexican people. If the Mexican people were legal to come into work, they wouldn't bring grandma, they wouldn't bring the kids, they wouldn't bring the wife. They would simply come here when their work is needed. They would not come to the border. They would be flown to the specific places where they're needed, and then they would go back. We create the incentive for people to cross the border with everything in their whole family and impact schools, hospitals, and everything precisely because we've made this free flow of people illegal. If you legalize it, you don't have all the, quote, problems of immigration.
Before we let you go, since you wrote a book about it, The Crypto Revolution, the strategic reserve that David Sachs is writing point on, that Trump is setting up, the strategic Bitcoin reserve, your view?
Why? Money's sole purpose is to move actual wealth. Why would you have a reserve of money that by definition it's digital? If you ever need it, you can get it. It's like having a gold reserve or something. Why? And if you're saying, well, we're doing this for investment purposes, what's the government doing trying to make money with our money on investment? Send it back to us. This is just nonsense.
John Tamny, editor of Real Clear Markets, RealClearMarket's.com, author of The Money Confusion, How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, thanks for joining us as always and getting our text line and call lines fired up. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.